The station hummed with the familiar mechanical symphony that had become Jules Rennes' lullaby. In the year 2247, nestled in the orbital path of a magnificent gas giant, Research Station Aurea stood as humanity's farthest permanent outpost in this sector. Its curved corridors, bathed in artificial light calibrated to mimic Earth's sunrise, had been Jules's home for 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Jules liked counting things. Numbers made sense. They didn't require interpretation or second-guessing like people did. As the station's senior maintenance engineer, he found peace in the reliable patterns of machinery, predictable, fixable, and rarely disappointed by his awkward attempts at conversation. "Good morning, Jules," the station's AI announced through the overhead speakers. "You're up 17 minutes earlier than your average Tuesday." "Morning, Nora," Jules mumbled, shuffling toward the small kitchenette in his quarters. "Couldn't sleep. Your cortisol levels appear elevated. Would you like me to adjust your circadian lighting?" Jules smiled despite himself. Nora's deadpan concern was the closest thing he had to a roommate. "No thanks. Just excited about the new stabilizer parts arriving today." "Excitement about stabilizer parts," Nora echoed. "I've updated your psychological profile accordingly." That was Nora's version of humor. Jules had grown fond of it over the years. He programmed the coffee machine for 2 cups. One for him, black with a hint of cinnamon, and one with a splash of cream. The second cup was a habit he couldn't explain, even to himself. Just in case someone stopped by. Just in case someone wanted to share a quiet morning before the station fully awakened. No one ever did. But Jules kept making that second cup anyway. With both mugs balanced carefully in his hands, he made his way toward his workshop near the docking bay. The early hour meant blissfully empty corridors, no forced small talk, no awkward nods to colleagues whose names he sometimes forgot despite serving with them for years. As he rounded the corner to the maintenance lab, the station-wide announcement system crackled to life. "Attention all personnel." Commander Harrow's clipped voice echoed through the corridors. "The Nari diplomatic vessel will be docking at 800 hours. All department heads report to Bay 3 for formal reception. All non-essential personnel are to continue regular duties with minimal disruption to our guests." Jules nearly spilled both coffees. The Nari delegation wasn't due for another 3 days. He had planned to have the environmental systems running at optimal efficiency before their arrival. The Nari were notoriously sensitive to temperature fluctuations and atmospheric composition. Rushing to his workstation, Jules pulled up the maintenance schedule and began rearranging priorities. The life support systems would need immediate attention, followed by the guest quarters' environmental controls. So much for a quiet morning. "Nora," Jules called out, "why wasn't I informed about the schedule change?" "The notification was sent to your personal terminal at 200 hours. Nora replied, "You were in REM sleep. I calculated that immediate awakening would result in a 73% productivity decrease." Jules sighed. "Thanks for letting me sleep, I guess." For the next hour, Jules worked frantically, fingers dancing across holographic displays as he fine-tuned environmental parameters throughout the station. The diplomats' quarters needed to be precisely 24.3 degrees Celsius with 42% humidity and a slightly higher oxygen concentration than human comfort levels required. At Aero 755, Jules was elbow-deep in an access panel near the docking bay when Nora's voice interrupted his concentration. "Hey, Jules. Commander Harrow is requesting all personnel clear the main corridor to Bay 3. The Nari vessel has begun docking procedures." Wiping his hands on his already stained jumpsuit, Jules closed the panel and retreated to a small observation alcove. From here, he could monitor the systems during docking without being in the way of the formal reception party. Through the reinforced glass, He watched as the sleek Nari vessel approached. Unlike the utilitarian human ships with their bulky engines and practical design, the Nari craft resembled an enormous teardrop of liquid mercury. It moved with impossible grace, as though the very concept of inertia didn't apply to it. Most striking of all was the complete absence of sound. No rumbling engines, no hissing stabilizers, not even the gentle whine of maneuvering thrusters. In 15 years of space station work, Jules had never witnessed a truly silent docking. Incredible, he whispered to himself. The vessel seemed to meld with the docking port rather than connect to it. A seamless integration that made the junction between human and Nari technology practically invisible. Jules made a mental note to examine the engineering specs later, if such information wasn't classified beyond his clearance level. The reception committee stood at attention. Commander Harrow at the center, flanked by the station's chief scientist, security head, and communications officer, all wearing their formal uniforms, polished and pressed for the occasion. Jules unconsciously ran a hand through his perpetually disheveled hair, suddenly aware of the coffee stain on his standard-issue jumpsuit. A gentle ripple appeared at the center of the Nari vessel's hull, and a doorway materialized where seconds before there had been only smooth, reflective surface. The station's lights dimmed slightly, automatically adjusting to the Nari's known visual sensitivity, and then she appeared. Later, Jules would struggle to describe his first glimpse of Aya Invasa Nari to Nora during his mandatory psychological debriefing. How could he explain that she seemed to both absorb and emit light simultaneously? That her movements were so fluid they made everyone else in the room look as though they were moving through gelatin by comparison? The Nari were humanoid in the broadest sense, bipedal with recognizable facial features and proportionate limbs. But that's where the similarities ended. Aya stood nearly 7 feet tall, her willowy frame draped in what appeared to be living fabric that shifted colors with her movements. Her skin was the pale blue of Earth's sky at high noon, traced with intricate patterns that resembled circuit boards or perhaps ancient glyphs. Most striking were her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and entirely black except for pinpricks of silver light that seemed to dance like distant stars. Jules felt his breath catch in his throat. He had seen images of the Nari before, but recordings failed to capture their true presence. There was an energy about Aya that made the air itself feel charged, as though the atmosphere in the room had become more substantial simply by containing her. Commander Harrow stepped forward with a formal bow. Ambassador Aya Invasa Nari, on behalf of the Earth Alliance and Station Aurea, we welcome you and your delegation. Jules noticed there was no delegation, just Aya. The Nari typically traveled in groups of 3 or more, with a movement so graceful it resembled liquid poured from one container to another. Aya returned the bow. When she spoke, her voice had a musical quality, as though each word were part of a larger composition. Commander Harrow, I bring harmonious greetings from the Nari Collective. I come alone as herald to prepare for the Elder Council's arrival in 3 cycles. They wished for me to assess compatibility before committing to full diplomatic presence. Jules leaned forward slightly, fascinated by the subtle harmonics in her speech pattern. The Nari were known to communicate on multiple frequencies simultaneously, with human audible speech being only the most basic level of their interaction. Then, as if sensing his scrutiny, Aya's gaze shifted from Commander Harrow directly to Jules's observation alcove. Those star-filled eyes locked onto his with such sudden intensity that Jules felt physically struck. His heart rate doubled instantly, and he experienced the bizarre sensation of being both seen and somehow heard, despite not having spoken aloud, panicking under her unwavering attention. Jules did what he always did in moments of social terror. He retreated into his own thoughts. And in that moment of pure aesthetic appreciation and social awkwardness, a thought bubbled up from some reckless part of his brain. "Oh, she's so beautiful," he whispered to himself, barely a breath. "I wonder if she'd marry me." It was the kind of absurd, hyperbolic thought that flashes through a person's mind and is immediately dismissed, the brain's equivalent of a system glitch. Something you'd never say aloud, something you'd immediately file away in the ridiculous thoughts to never revisit category. Except Aya's posture changed instantly. Her head tilted slightly, and those stellar eyes widened fractionally. The living fabric of her garment rippled once, shifting from cool blue to a brief flash of amber before settling back. Jules felt the blood drain from his face. There was no way she could have heard him. Absolutely no way. And yet, something in her reaction made him feel exposed, as though his fleeting, ridiculous thought had been broadcast across the station's emergency channel. Commander Harrow was still speaking, reviewing the schedule for the diplomatic visit. But Aya's attention remained fixed on Jules for 3 more excruciating seconds before she smoothly returned her focus to the commander. Jules backed away from the observation window, heart hammering against his ribs. He needed to retreat, regroup, and most importantly, avoid any further contact with the Nari ambassador until he could convince himself that the entire interaction had been a product of his sleep-deprived imagination. "Nora," he whispered urgently, "I need an immediate systems check in Section 7, far side of the station." Section 7 environmental systems are functioning at 99.7% efficiency. Nora replied. "No maintenance required at this time." "Override," Jules hissed. "Priority assessment needed." "Override accepted," Nora replied, though her tone carried a hint of AI skepticism. "Though I must note this appears to be an illogical allocation of resources. It just marked me as unavailable for the next 3 hours," Jules muttered as he hurried away from the docking bay, feeling the phantom weight of those star-filled eyes still upon him. He'd make himself scarce for the remainder of the day. Surely the ambassador would be occupied with official meetings and tours. By tomorrow, she would have forgotten the awkward maintenance engineer who had stared at her too long. Jules had no way of knowing that the Nari didn't forget anything, and that for Aya Invasa Nari, his whispered words had been as clear as if he'd shouted them through a megaphone. Because the Nari didn't just hear sounds, they heard intent. The following morning, Jules awoke to Nora's gentle alert tone. "Good morning, Jules. You have 17 new system notifications and 1 personal message from Commander Harrow." Jules groaned, rolling onto his back and blinking up at the ceiling. "Read the personal message first." Message begins. "Ren, the Nari ambassador has specifically requested a tour of our maintenance facilities today at 1100 hours. As our senior maintenance engineer, you will conduct this tour personally. This is not optional. Wear a clean jumpsuit. Harrow out." Message ends. Jules sat bolt upright, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. She requested maintenance? Why would a diplomat care about coolant systems and pressure regulators? "Unknown," Nora replied. "However, Nari interest in human technology has been documented in previous diplomatic exchanges. Cancel all my other appointments today," Jules said, already calculating how many hours he would need to make the maintenance bay presentable. "And Nora, what do we know about Nari sensory capabilities?" Nari sensory physiology remains largely classified. Known capabilities include enhanced visual spectrum, sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, and complex auditory processing. Unconfirmed reports suggest forms of empathic or telepathic abilities. "Telepathic?" Jules squeaked. "Unconfirmed," Nora emphasized. "Such reports are considered speculative by the scientific community." Jules spent the next 3 hours in a cleaning frenzy. The maintenance bay, normally organized to his own eccentric system, was meticulously arranged and labeled. He changed into his newest jumpsuit, ran a hand futilely through his unruly hair, and then paced nervously waiting for his visitor. At precisely 1100 hours, the maintenance bay doors slid open with a soft hiss. Ambassador Aya entered alone, her tall frame making the doorway seem suddenly inadequate. Today, her living garment shimmered with subtle greens and blues, reminiscent of Earth's oceans. Ambassador, Jules managed, attempting a formal bow that felt stiff and awkward. Welcome to the maintenance bay. I'm Jules Wren, senior maintenance engineer. Aya studied him with those disconcerting stellar eyes. Yes, the observer from the docking, the one who speaks quietly to himself. Jules felt his face burn. I sometimes talk through problems. Engineering habit. Fascinating, she replied, her head tilting slightly. In Nari culture, words spoken aloud, even softly, are considered deliberate communication with those present. Right, Jules said, tugging at his collar. Cultural differences, very interesting. Would you like to see our environmental control systems first? Or perhaps the power distribution grid? Aya moved further into the room, her movements creating barely a sound. She seemed to examine everything not by looking directly at it, but by sensing it somehow. Your station hums with discordant frequencies, she observed. Yet you find harmony in them. It wasn't a question, but Jules answered anyway. Each system has its own rhythm. After a while, you learn to hear when something's out of tune. Yes, Aya said, turning those stellar eyes back to him. I believe you do. She paused, then added, You whispered something when I arrived yesterday. Something about beauty and joining. Jules felt the floor drop out from under him. I didn't mean... Do humans often propose matrimonial unions upon first visual contact? She asked, her tone genuinely curious. Jules contemplated whether the airlock would be a preferable alternative to this conversation. No, I mean, that wasn't... It was just a silly thought. Humans have those sometimes. Thoughts that aren't meant to be shared or taken seriously. Yet you vocalized it, Aya noted. I didn't think anyone could hear me. Jules admitted miserably. Interesting, Aya said. She moved closer, towering over him. The Nari hear intention as clearly as sound. When you spoke, your intention resonated. It was unexpected. Jules wanted nothing more than to sink through the floor panels. I am so sorry for the inappropriate comment. I meant no disrespect to you or the Nari collective. To his surprise, Aya's living garment rippled with a color he hadn't seen before, a soft lavender that seemed to pulse gently. No disrespect was perceived. Jules Wren. Merely curiosity. Before Jules could formulate a response, the maintenance bay doors opened again, and Commander Harrow strode in, datapad in hand. Ambassador, he acknowledged with a formal nod. I trust Engineer Wren is providing a satisfactory tour? Most illuminating, Aya replied, her garment shifting back to blues and greens. Jules Wren explains your systems with passion. Jules coughed. We were just about to examine the atmospheric processors. Excellent, Harrow said, though his expression suggested he found nothing about the situation excellent. Ambassador, the station's scientific team has prepared a presentation on our deep space observation capabilities. Perhaps you would find that more engaging than maintenance systems? Aya's gaze remained on Jules for a moment longer than comfortable before she turned to Harrow. I shall observe both. The engineers of a society often understand its true nature better than its diplomats. Was that a slight at Harrow? Jules couldn't tell, but the commander's posture stiffened minutely. As you wish, Ambassador Engineer Wren, I expect a full report on this tour by 1800 hours. Yes, Commander, Jules replied automatically. After Harrow departed, an awkward silence fell between Jules and the ambassador. Finally, Jules cleared his throat. About what I said. You have a squeaking floor panel, Aya interrupted, pointing to a spot near Jules's workstation. Jules blinked at the non sequitur. I'm sorry? When you spoke yesterday, you were standing on a loose floor panel. It created a resonant frequency that amplified your whisper. That is why I heard you so clearly. A simple mechanical explanation. She tilted her head. Does this explanation ease your discomfort? It took Jules a moment to understand what she was offering. A face-saving excuse. A way to pretend his embarrassing thought had been nothing more than a quirk of acoustics. Relief washed over him. Yes, thank you, I should fix that panel. Aya's garment rippled with what might have been amusement. Perhaps later, for now. Show me how you maintain the breath of this metal world. For the next 2 hours. Jules guided Aya through the station's maintenance systems. To his surprise, she asked insightful technical questions and seemed genuinely interested in the engineering solutions to deep space habitation problems. By the time they reached the atmospheric processing center, Jules had almost forgotten his initial embarrassment, falling into the comfortable rhythm of technical explanation. And this is where we balance the gas mixture for the entire station, he explained, patting the massive central processor. Oxygen, nitrogen, trace gases, humidity, all controlled from here. Aya placed her slender blue hand on the machine, and Jules could have sworn the processor's normal humming changed pitch slightly in response. Your machines sing to you, she observed. But you do not always listen with enough attention. I'm sorry? Aya's stellar eyes fixed on him. This unit's harmonic resonance indicates microfractures in the secondary processing chamber. You would call it preventative maintenance opportunity. Jules frowned and pulled up the diagnostic display, running a level 3 scan. He watched in astonishment as the results confirmed exactly what Aya had described. Hairline fractures in a chamber that would have been difficult to detect until they caused a significant failure. How did you know that? He asked, unable to keep the awe from his voice. I listened, she said simply, then, with what might have been the Nari equivalent of a smile, she added, perhaps your whispers and my hearing can be mutually beneficial. Jules Rennes. After the tour concluded, Jules retreated to his quarters, his mind racing with more questions than answers. He recorded his official report for Commander Harrow, careful to keep it professional and technical, omitting any mention of Aya's uncanny ability to diagnose machinery by touch or her reference to his embarrassing whisper. Just as he was preparing for bed, Nora's voice interrupted the silence. Jules, you have a message request from Ambassador Aya Invasanari. Jules nearly dropped his toothbrush. A message? For me? Why? The ambassador did not specify. Shall I accept the connection? Yes, no, wait. Jules looked down at his sleep clothes, worn sweatpants and a faded t-shirt from the Jupiter mining colony. Audio only, please. Connection established, audio only, Nora confirmed. Jules Rennes, Aya's melodic voice filled his quarters. I request your assistance with a research project during my stay. Your sensitivity to mechanical harmonics would be valuable. My sensitivity to what exactly would this project involve, Ambassador? The Nari communicate through resonance frequencies. I am studying how humans perceive and respond to these frequencies. Commander Harrow has approved the research as a cultural exchange initiative. Jules hesitated. On one hand, spending more time with Aya meant more opportunities for embarrassment. On the other hand, He was genuinely curious about Nari technology and communication methods. "When would this start?" he asked cautiously. "Tomorrow. Your maintenance schedule indicates a period of availability between 1400 and 1700 hours. Of course, she'd checked his schedule. "Yes, I'm available then. Where should I meet you?" "I will come to your maintenance bay. It has interesting acoustics." There was a pause. Then she added, "And Jules Wren? There is no squeaking floor panel. I heard you because you meant to be heard, whether you knew it or not." Before Jules could stammer a response, the connection closed. Jules stared at the ceiling for a long time that night, wondering what exactly he had gotten himself into. And why, despite his embarrassment and anxiety, he felt a flutter of anticipation at the thought of tomorrow's meeting. The next day, Jules found himself checking the time display far too frequently as 1400 hours approached. He'd spent the morning running diagnostics on the fractures Aya had detected, confirming they would need specialized repairs within the next month. The discovery had earned him a rare nod of approval from Commander Harrow, though the commander remained skeptical about how Jules had found the problem. Routine diagnostics. Jules had lied, unable to explain that an alien ambassador had essentially listened to the machinery's pain. At precisely 1400 hours. Aya entered the maintenance bay, this time carrying what appeared to be a small silver case. Her living garment today shimmered with deep purples and midnight blues. "Hey, Jules Wren," she greeted him. "You are prepared for our resonance session?" "I'm not sure what to be prepared for," Jules admitted, "but I'm ready to help however I can." Aya placed the silver case on a clear workbench and opened it with a touch. Inside were 7 spheres of varying sizes, each appearing to be made of the same liquid mercury material as the Nari vessel. "These are resonators," she explained, lifting the smallest sphere, which was roughly the size of a marble. "They create harmonic frequencies that the Nari use for emotional and conceptual communication." "So they're like translators?" Jules asked, fascinated despite his nervousness. "More like emotional amplifiers. They do not translate thoughts into words, but rather create resonance patterns that evoke specific emotional and cognitive states." Aya lifted the sphere to eye level, and it began to hover above her palm, spinning slowly. "Observe." The sphere emitted no sound that Jules could hear. Yet he suddenly felt a wave of calm curiosity wash over him, the same feeling he experienced when examining a new piece of machinery for the first time. "Whoa," he breathed. "I felt that like professional interest, curiosity." Aya's garment pulsed briefly with a pleased golden hue. "Excellent reception. Many humans require multiple exposures before they consciously perceive the resonance." One by one, Aya activated the other spheres. Each created a different emotional response in Jules. One brought a sharp sense of alertness, another a wistful melancholy, a third something akin to amused affection. "This is amazing," Jules said, watching the spheres hover in a complex orbital pattern above the workbench. "But how can I help with your research? I'm just an engineer, not a xenolinguist or psychologist. The Nari value authenticity of response over academic analysis," Aya explained. "You respond to machinery with genuine emotion, not clinical detachment. This makes your reactions valuable." For the next hour, Aya conducted what she called emotional resonance mapping. She would activate different combinations of the spheres, and Jules would describe what he felt. Sometimes the emotions were familiar: joy, sorrow, anticipation. Other times, they were complex states he struggled to name. "It's like the feeling when you know you've forgotten something important but can't remember what." He attempted to explain after one particularly confusing resonance pattern. Humans call this tip of the tongue phenomenon. Aya noted, making an adjustment to one of the spheres. The Nari call it eclipsed knowing. Jules found himself relaxing as the session continued. There was something surprisingly comfortable about discussing emotional states with Aya. Perhaps because the resonators provided a buffer, a way to experience feelings without having to generate them himself. "May I ask a personal question?" Jules ventured as Aya reconfigured the spheres for another test. "You may. Why did you really request a tour of the maintenance bay? I doubt Nari diplomats typically spend their time examining human waste recycling systems." Aya's stellar eyes studied him for a moment before she answered. Your whisper contained genuine appreciation without expectation. This is rare in diplomatic contexts, where every word is calculated for advantage. I wish to understand the source of such uncalculated admiration. Jules felt his face warm. And did you? Understand, I mean? I am beginning to, she replied. You find beauty in systems others ignore. You listen to machines as though they speak. These are resonant qualities to the Nari. Before Jules could formulate a response to what felt remarkably like a compliment, the maintenance bay doors slid open, and Mari, one of the junior engineers, entered. She stopped short at the sight of the hovering spheres and the tall Nari ambassador. Oh, sorry, Jules. Didn't realize you had company. Mari's eyes widened as she took in the scene, a knowing smile spreading across her face. Ambassador, I apologize for the interruption. No interruption, Aya assured her. We were conducting resonance testing. Mari's smile grew wider. Is that what they're calling it these days? Don't mind me, just need to grab a plasma coupler. She winked at Jules as she retrieved the tool from a nearby cabinet. Carry on with your resonance. After Mari left, Jules groaned and covered his face with his hands. And now the rumors begin. Rumors? Aya questioned. Mari thinks we're... Jules struggled to find a diplomatic way to explain. She's going to tell everyone we're engaging in some form of human Nari fraternization. Ah, Aya said, her garment rippling with what might have been amusement. Social perception contaminating objective reality. This happens among the Nari as well, though our methods of gossip are more harmonically complex. Jules couldn't help but laugh. Good to know some things are universal. By the time their session ended, Jules had almost forgotten to be nervous around Aya. The resonators had created a strange intimacy between them, a shared experience of emotions that bypassed the awkwardness of words. Same time tomorrow? He found himself asking as Aya packed away the spheres. Yes, she agreed, her garment pulsing with a warm copper hue he hadn't seen before. Tomorrow we will attempt more complex resonance patterns. As she turned to leave, Jules called after her. Ambassador, thank you for not making me feel weird about, you know, what I said. Aya paused at the doorway. Jules Wren, in Nari culture, accidental truth is valued above intentional falsehood. Your whisper was accidental truth. With that cryptic statement, she departed, leaving Jules to wonder exactly what she meant. Over the next week, Jules and Aya fell into a routine. Each afternoon they would meet in the maintenance bay for resonance testing. The sessions grew longer and more complex, with Aya introducing new spheres and more nuanced emotional states. Jules found himself looking forward to these meetings with an eagerness that surprised him. Word spread quickly through the station about the unusual partnership. Jules caught snippets of conversation that fell silent when he entered rooms. Saw knowing glances exchanged when he and Aya were seen together in the corridors. Commander Harrow summoned him for a brief but pointed reminder about maintaining professional boundaries with diplomatic guests. Nothing unprofessional is happening, Commander, Jules had assured him. It's a cultural exchange project. The ambassador is researching human emotional responses to Nari resonance frequencies. Harrow had fixed him with a skeptical stare. Just remember that you represent not just this station, but the entire Earth Alliance. The Nari are valuable allies, but also extremely private about their cultural practices. Don't mess this up. Ren. On the 8th day of their collaboration, Aya arrived at the maintenance bay with a new proposal. The Elder Council will arrive in 2 days, she announced. They have expressed interest in our resonance project and request a formal demonstration. Jules nearly dropped the diagnostic tool he was holding. A demonstration? For the Nari elders? But I'm just a test subject, not a performer. Not a test subject, Aya corrected. A collaboration partner, and the demonstration would be simple, merely a showing of how humans and Nari can share emotional resonance despite physiological differences. But what if I mess up? What if I can't feel the right emotions at the right time? I'm not exactly known for my emotional intelligence. Aya. It was the first time he had used her name without her title, but she didn't seem to mind. In fact, her garment rippled with a pleased shimmer. You will not mess up. Jules Ren, your responses have been remarkably consistent and authentic. The elders value authenticity above all. Jules took a deep breath. Okay. What do we need to do to prepare? We must create a harmonized resonance pattern, one that combines Nari frequencies with human emotional response. This will require more advanced technology than the portable resonators. Aya's stellar eyes seemed to brighten with enthusiasm. We will need to convert your laboratory into a harmonic chamber. And so began 3 days of frantic preparation. Jules cleared the maintenance bay of unnecessary equipment, following Aya's precise instructions for acoustic optimization. She brought in larger resonator spheres from her vessel, positioning them throughout the room in a complex geometric pattern that Jules recognized as resembling a 3-dimensional fractal. Mari and several other engineers helped, though their assistance came with relentless teasing. So, planning the wedding registry yet? Mari asked as she helped install a specialized sensor array that Aya had provided. I hear Nari traditional gifts are psychically bonded to the couple. Very romantic. It's a scientific demonstration. Jules protested for what felt like the 100th time. Cross-species communication research. Mari grinned. Is that why you've been humming to yourself and actually making eye contact with people in the corridors? Nari influence is good for you, Jules. Had he been doing that? Jules hadn't noticed a change in his behavior, but now that Mari mentioned it, he had been feeling less anxious in social situations lately. The resonance sessions with Aya had somehow made emotions seem less frightening, more like different frequencies to be understood rather than chaotic forces to be avoided. The day before the Elder's arrival, Commander Harrow visited the transformed maintenance bay. He stood in the doorway, surveying the array of hovering spheres, sensor panels, and reconfigured workstations with obvious concern. What exactly is happening in my maintenance bay? Engineer Ren, he demanded. Before Jules could answer, Aya emerged from behind a particularly large resonator. Commander Harrow, we are preparing for the cultural exchange demonstration. Your station's unique acoustic properties make it ideal for this purpose. Harrow's frown deepened. Ambassador, while I appreciate the cultural significance, I must express concern about converting essential maintenance facilities into whatever this is. All station systems are functioning at peak efficiency, Aya assured him. Jules Ren has ensured that maintenance operations remain unaffected. That's not my only concern, Harrow said, lowering his voice. The Nari observer, Hironi, arrived with the advance team this morning. He has expressed reservations about the nature of this demonstration. Jules felt his stomach drop. Reservations? The integration of human neural patterns with Nari resonance technology has limited precedent, Harrow explained carefully. Observer Hironi has suggested it may constitute an inappropriate sharing of Nari cultural technology. Aya's garment darkened to a deep indigo. Observer Hironi's concerns are noted but unfounded. The collective has approved this research. Harrow looked unconvinced. Nevertheless, I'm assigning security personnel to tomorrow's demonstration, as a precaution. After Harrow left, Jules turned to Aya with concern. Is this going to cause trouble for you? I don't want to create a diplomatic incident. Aya's garment gradually lightened back to its usual blues and purples. Hironi represents a conservative faction within the collective. They believe Nari resonance should remain purely Nari. She adjusted one of the smaller spheres, which hummed in response. But progress requires harmonizing with new frequencies, not isolating the old ones. There was something in her tone that made Jules wonder if she was referring to more than just the demonstration. The morning of the demonstration arrived with a station-wide atmosphere of anticipation. The Nari Elder Council's vessel had docked during the night shift, another silent arrival that had nevertheless woken Jules from a fitful sleep. He'd spent the pre-dawn hours making final adjustments to the harmonic chamber, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Nora, he asked as he straightened his formal uniform for the third time. What's the protocol for addressing Nari elders? Nari elders are traditionally addressed by their full harmonious designation, Nora informed him. However, human vocal apparatus cannot reproduce the full harmonic range. The accepted alternative is honored elder followed by their primary designation. And how do I avoid accidentally proposing marriage to any of them? Jules muttered. I have insufficient data to answer that query, Nora replied. Though based on your interaction with Ambassador Aya, perhaps silence would be the most prudent approach. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Jules sighed. He arrived at the harmonic chamber 30 minutes early, only to find Aya already there, making final adjustments to the central resonator array. Today, her living garment shimmered with formal silver and deep purples that seemed to absorb the light around her. Jules Wren, she greeted him, her voice carrying a new resonance that made his name sound like a musical phrase. Your thoughts are turbulent today. That obvious, huh? Jules attempted a smile. Just nervous about the demonstration. I've never performed for a diplomatic audience before. It is not a performance, Aya corrected gently. It is a demonstration of genuine resonance. All you must do is be present and receptive, as you have been in our sessions. What exactly will happen today? Jules asked, eyeing the newly installed neural scanner that hovered near what was clearly his designated position. You've been a bit vague on the details. Aya approached him, her tall form moving with that fluid grace that still captivated him. Today, we will attempt to create a unified resonance field, a harmonizing of Nari frequencies with human emotional response. Your neural patterns will be mapped and integrated with the resonator array, creating a visual and auditory representation of cross-species empathic connection. That sounds intimate, Jules observed, his throat suddenly dry. It is, Aya acknowledged. Such connection is rarely attempted outside Nari familial units or... She paused, her garment flickering briefly with that copper hue he'd noticed before. Or bonded pairs, before Jules could ask her to elaborate. The chamber doors slid open. Commander Harrow entered, followed by a procession of Nari elders. Jules counted 7 of them, each taller than Aya and draped in living garments that seemed more elaborate, with deeper colors and more complex patterns. Behind them came a lone Nari whom Jules immediately identified as Observer Hironi, distinguished by his garment's rigid patterns and unchanging charcoal color. Jules straightened to attention, trying to remember everything he'd read about Nari formal protocol. Honored elders, he greeted them with a deep bow. Welcome to Station Auria's harmonic chamber. The eldest of the group, a Nari with silver markings across blue-black skin, inclined their heads slightly. Engineer Jules Wren, your reputation precedes you. Jules blinked in surprise. My reputation? The Herald Aya has spoken of your unusual sensitivity to resonance frequencies, the elder explained. And your expressive whispering? Jules felt heat rush to his face as several of the elder's garments rippled with what he now recognized as amusement. Even Commander Harrow looked confused by the reference. Aya stepped forward smoothly. Honored elders, we have prepared a demonstration of cross-species harmonic resonance. With your permission, we will proceed. The lead elder gestured permission, and the Nari delegation arranged themselves in a semicircle around the central resonator array. Observer Hironi positioned himself slightly apart, his posture rigid, and his stellar eyes fixed unblinkingly on Jules. Aya guided Jules to his position beneath the neural scanner. Remember, she said quietly, authenticity above all. Feel what you feel, without filtering or restraint. That's what I'm afraid of, Jules whispered back. With a gesture from Aya, the resonator spheres began to activate, rising higher in the air and spinning in increasingly complex patterns. The neural scanner above Jules hummed to life, casting a soft blue light over him. Phase 1, Baseline Resonance Establishment, Aya announced formally. She activated the smallest resonator, and Jules felt the now familiar wave of calm curiosity wash over him. The neural scanner pulsed in response, and one of the larger spheres changed color to match the scanner's readings. The human neural pattern is being translated into Nari resonance frequency, Aya explained to the elders. Observe the harmonic alignment. The resonator spheres adjusted their orbits slightly, creating what Jules could only describe as a three-dimensional representation of his emotional state. He could see his own curiosity and nervousness rendered as patterns of light and motion. Phase 2, Reciprocal Resonance, Aya continued. She activated 3 more spheres in quick succession. Jules felt a cascade of emotions, not his own, but clearly transmitted: formal appreciation, scientific interest, and an emotion he couldn't quite name. But that felt like standing at the edge of a great discovery. The elders' collective emotional presence, Aya explained quietly to Jules. To the delegation, she said, the human subject is now receiving collective resonance. Jules watched in fascination as the neural scanner's readings changed, showing his reception and integration of the Nari emotions. The visual representation shifted, the patterns of light and motion becoming more complex, more intertwined. Phase 3, Harmonic Integration, Aya announced. She moved to stand beside Jules, close enough that he could feel a subtle vibration emanating from her, like standing near a powerful but perfectly balanced engine. This is the most complex phase, requiring simultaneous projection and reception. She turned to Jules, those stellar eyes meeting his directly. Focus on a single emotional truth. Jules Wren. Project it without words. Jules took a deep breath. What single emotion could possibly encompass what he wanted to express? His mind raced through possibilities: gratitude for her patience with his awkwardness, fascination with her world, the surprising comfort he'd found in their resonance sessions. In the end, what rose to the surface was simple: affection. uncomplicated, undemanding affection for this being who had heard his most embarrassing thought and responded with curiosity rather than disgust. He closed his eyes and focused on that feeling, imagining it as a frequency, a vibration, a song without words. The room fell completely silent. Then, slowly, Jules became aware of a new sound, a harmonic tone unlike anything he'd heard before. He opened his eyes to see all the resonator spheres pulsing with a color he hadn't seen them produce before, a luminescent teal that seemed to flow like water. Aya stood perfectly still beside him, her garment flowing with the same teal luminescence. The neural scanner above them had expanded its field to encompass them both, creating a shared aura of light. A harmonic convergence achieved, Aya said, her voice carrying a depth of resonance that seemed to vibrate in Jules' chest. Cross-species emotional synchronization confirmed. The Elder Council leaned forward collectively, their garments rippling with what Jules hoped was approval. Even Observer Hironi's rigid posture had softened slightly. His stellar eyes widened in what might have been surprise. The lead elder raised a hand, and the resonator spheres slowed their spinning. "This color," they observed. "It is not in our catalogued resonance spectrum." "No, honored elder," Aya confirmed. "It appears to be a new harmonic, created by the specific integration of this human's neural patterns with Nari resonance technology. Unprecedented," another elder commented, their garment pulsing with rapid color changes. Observer Hironi stepped forward. "Unprecedented does not necessarily mean appropriate," he stated, his voice lacking the musical quality of the other Nari. "The creation of new resonance patterns outside collective oversight raises security concerns." Jules felt his heart sink. Had they violated some sacred Nari protocol? Would this end the diplomatic exchange? The lead elder turned to Hironi. "Observer, your concerns are noted." Then, to Jules's surprise, the elder's garment rippled with what looked like amusement. "However, precedent does exist for such harmonic innovations." "Precedent?" Hironi questioned. The binding records mention 17 instances of new resonance harmonics created through cross-species interaction. The elder stated, "In 14 of those instances, the interaction was between Nari and species with whom we later formed our strongest alliances." Jules could hardly believe what he was hearing. Far from being a diplomatic disaster, their demonstration seemed to have impressed the Elder Council. "Furthermore," the Elder continued, "the emotional fusion trials of the Third Harmonic Age established clear protocols for such occurrences." They turned their stellar gaze to Aya. "Herald Aya, you were aware of these protocols?" Aya's garment pulsed once with confirmation. "Yes, honored elder. The protocols specify a period of continued resonance study to determine stability and replicability. Then it is decided," the elder announced. "Herald Aya will continue this research with engineer Jules Wren for the duration of our diplomatic exchange. Observer Hironi will document the findings for the collective archives." Hironi's garment darkened briefly, but he inclined his head in acceptance. "As the council directs," Commander Harrow, who had been watching the entire exchange with barely concealed bewilderment, stepped forward. "Elder Council, on behalf of Station Aurea and the Earth Alliance, we are honored to facilitate this research. However, I must ensure it doesn't interfere with essential station operations." "Of course, Commander," the lead elder agreed. "We propose a balanced approach, 4 cycles of research followed by 1 cycle of regular duties in alternating sequence. After further discussion of logistics and schedules, the demonstration was declared complete." As the Elder Council departed, followed by a slightly less rigid observer Hironi, Jules felt the tension drain from his body. Did we just accidentally make scientific history? he asked Aya once they were alone. There are no accidents in resonance, Jules Wren, she replied, her garment still shimmering with traces of that new teal color. Only harmonies waiting to be discovered. And the emotional fusion trials the elder mentioned? What exactly does that involve? Aya's stellar eyes seemed to twinkle. Traditionally, it involves close proximity study of the resonance subjects. The Nari term translates roughly to cohabitation experiment. Jules nearly choked. Cohabitation, as in I shall be relocating to your quarters for the duration of the study. Aya confirmed, with what Jules was now certain was the Nari equivalent of a smile. For scientific purposes, of course. Of course, Jules echoed faintly, wondering how exactly he was going to explain this development to Commander Harrow, or to Mari and the rest of the engineering team, who would never let him hear the end of it. But beneath his panic was a surprising current of anticipation. The resonance demonstration had shown him something important. When he stopped filtering himself through fear and doubt, when he projected his genuine feelings without restraint, something new and beautiful could emerge. Perhaps living with an alien who could hear his every whispered thought wouldn't be so terrifying after all. Your quarters are satisfactory, Aya declared upon entering Jules' living space the following evening. She surveyed the modest room, standard station accommodations with a few personal touches, books on engineering theory, a small collection of earth plants, and a handcrafted model of an early deep space vessel. It's not much, Jules apologized, hastily clearing a stack of technical manuals from the small dining table. I wasn't exactly expecting company when I decorated. The resonance is balanced, Aya observed, moving through the space with her characteristic fluid grace. Your presence has harmonized this environment. Jules wasn't sure if that was a compliment or simply an observation. Thank you. The guest quarters would probably be more comfortable for you. They're larger, with adjustable environmental controls. The purpose of cohabitation is immersion in authentic living patterns, Aya explained, placing a small case, presumably containing personal items, beside the couch. Separate quarters would defeat this purpose. Right? Science? Jules rubbed the back of his neck. So, you take the bed, of course. I'll sleep on the couch. Aya tilted her head in that now familiar gesture of curiosity. The Nari require minimal horizontal rest. 3 hours in a meditative position is sufficient. The couch will accommodate my needs adequately during those periods. Oh, good. Jules wasn't sure what else to say. Having a roommate was unfamiliar territory for him, let alone a roommate from another species who could hear his unspoken thoughts. Silence stretched between them, not necessarily uncomfortable, but heavy with unasked questions. Finally, Aya spoke. Your thought frequencies suggest uncertainty. You may ask what you wish to know. Jules sighed with relief at the permission. Okay. How is this going to work exactly? What are we studying, and how do we... privacy and personal space and all that? We are studying the stability of our harmonic convergence outside controlled conditions, Aya explained, seating herself on the couch with perfect posture. As for privacy, the Nari respect mental boundaries. I will not actively perceive your thoughts unless they are directed outward, what you would call speaking aloud. But what about, accidental thoughts, things people think but don't mean to share? Jules felt his face warming at the memory of his first whispered words about her. Aya's garment rippled with that copper hue he was beginning to associate with amusement. Accidental truths, as I have called them. These are valuable data points for our study. However, if you wish to establish boundaries around certain thought categories, this can be arranged. Actually, I think I'm tired of filtering everything I think and feel. Jules admitted. It's exhausting, always second-guessing myself, always worried about saying or thinking the wrong thing. Maybe it's better if I just, This is a very Nari perspective, Aya observed, her garment shifting to an approving shade of deep blue. We believe that resonance cannot be false. It simply is or is not. The energy you humans expend attempting to project false resonance is, as you say, exhausting. Jules smiled ruefully. I've been doing it my whole life. Not sure I know how to stop. Perhaps that is the true purpose of our research. Aya suggested, not merely studying cross-species resonance, but learning to trust one's own frequency. Over the following days, Jules and Aya established a routine that gradually transformed from awkward navigation of shared space to comfortable coexistence. Mornings began with Jules showing Aya how to operate the coffee machine. She developed a preference for the second cup he had always made, though she added an alarming amount of sugar. Evenings often found them in the small sitting area, Jules reading technical manuals while Aya performed what she called personal resonance calibration with a small sphere that emitted a barely audible humming. At first, Jules found himself constantly monitoring his thoughts, paranoid about what Aya might overhear. But as days passed, he gradually relaxed. Aya never mentioned his stray thoughts about her height. How did she find clothes? Her eating habits. Did the living garment need nutrition too? Or his occasional appreciation of the way light played across her blue skin? Instead, their conversations focused on their official research. Daily resonance sessions with the portable spheres Aya had brought to his quarters. Meticulous recordings of emotional states and harmonic convergences, and preparation of reports for both the Elder Council and Commander Harrow. A week into their cohabitation, Jules returned from his maintenance shift to find Aya adjusting the environmental controls in his quarters. I hope you don't mind, she said as he entered. I've recalibrated the ambient light spectrum to better accommodate both our visual ranges. Jules looked around, noting the subtle difference in lighting, slightly more blue-tinted than the standard station illumination. It's nice. Easier on the eyes, actually. Precisely, Aya agreed. Human lighting prioritizes functional visibility over harmonic balance. This spectrum supports both. Jules set down his toolkit and collapsed onto the couch with a groan. You wouldn't believe the day I've had. The primary cooling system in Section 4 decided to develop a harmonic imbalance. Your terminology is rubbing off on me. And we spent 6 hours tracking down the source. And did you locate it? Aya asked, seating herself beside him, closer than she would have a week ago. He noticed a microscopic crack in one of the coolant valves, invisible to standard diagnostics. But it created just enough turbulence to throw off the entire system. He turned to her with a tired smile. I actually found it by listening, like you taught me. Put my ear against each valve and heard the one that wasn't singing right. Aya's garment pulsed with pleasure. You are developing resonance sensitivity. Either that or I'm going crazy from lack of sleep, Jules joked. Speaking of which, how were the elders today? Any new developments with the research? The council is pleased with our progress, Aya reported. The teal resonance has been officially designated as a new harmonic category. Convergent empathic resonance type HJ. HJ? Jules questioned. Human Jules, Aya clarified. The first documented instance of this particular resonance pattern. Jules sat up straighter. They named it after me? I'm in the official Nari resonance catalog? Your neural pattern is a key component of the harmonic. Aya confirmed. It is a significant honor among the Nari to have one's resonance cataloged. Wow. Jules leaned back, processing this information. So I'm famous on your world now? The human with the weird brainwaves? Aya's garment rippled with amusement. Not famous, perhaps, but noted in the scientific archives. Observer Hironi was particularly thorough in documenting your neural responses during today's session. Hironi's warming up to me then. He remains professionally skeptical, Aya said diplomatically. But he cannot deny the consistency of our results. Jules smiled. In human terms, that's practically a ringing endorsement. Their conversation was interrupted by a chime from the door. Jules called for it to open, revealing Marie, holding a small package. Hey, Jules, I brought that circuit board you... She stopped short at the sight of Aya sitting comfortably on Jules's couch. Oh, Ambassador Aya, I didn't realize you were here. Engineering specialist Mari. Aya greeted her formally. Your presence is harmonious. Mari's eyes darted between them, a slow grin spreading across her face. Right, harmonious. I just came to drop this off for Jules, but I can come back later if you two are in the middle of research. We were discussing today's resonance session results, Jules explained, knowing it would do nothing to dispel Mari's obvious assumptions. Of course you were, Mari agreed, setting the package on the nearest surface. Don't let me interrupt your resonance. The whole engineering department is talking about how your quarters have been glowing with unusual light patterns every evening. And that would be the calibrated ambient spectrum, Aya explained, apparently missing the innuendo. It facilitates optimal visual processing for both human and Nari physiology. Is that what they're calling it these days? Mari winked at Jules. Well, I'll leave you two to your optimal visual processing. Oh, and Jules? The bet pool about when you'll formally announce your interspecies relationship has reached 300 credits. Just so you know, after Mari left, Jules buried his face in his hands. I am so sorry about that. Station gossip is unstoppable. You are embarrassed by the assumption of romantic association? Aya asked, her tone neutral. Jules looked up quickly. No, I'm embarrassed that they're making assumptions and betting on us without knowing anything about what we're actually doing. It's invasive, yet not entirely inaccurate, Aya observed quietly. Jules blinked. What do you mean? Aya's garment shifted to that copper-gold hue that had become more frequent during their time together. The resonance we generate contains elements consistent with what Nari would classify as preliminary bonding harmonics. This is part of what makes our research significant. Such resonance typically only occurs between Nari with established emotional connections. Oh. Jules wasn't sure how to respond to that. And that's okay with you and the council and everything? It is unexpected but not prohibited. Aya replied, cross-species bonding is rare but not unprecedented. The emotional fusion trials I mentioned were originally designed to study exactly this phenomenon. Jules took a moment to process this information. So when you suggested cohabitation, it was both scientific protocol and personal interest, Aya admitted. I find your resonance uniquely compatible with my own. A warm feeling spread through Jules's chest, a mixture of surprise, pleasure, and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. I find your resonance pretty compatible too, he said softly. Even if I don't have the right terminology for it. Aya's stellar eyes seemed to brighten. Human terminology has its own value. Perhaps you could teach me more of your expressions for resonance compatibility. You mean like how humans talk about relationships? Yes, cultural exchange is an essential component of our research. Jules smiled. Well, for starters, we might say I have a crush on you, or I'm attracted to you, or I like spending time with you. These are preliminary compatibility statements? Aya asked, clearly cataloging the phrases. Exactly. Then there are more serious expressions like, I'm falling for you or I care deeply about you. And the ultimate expression? The one you whispered when we first met? Aya's gaze was intense but gentle. Jules felt his face warm. That's usually reserved for when you're really sure. It's a big commitment in human culture, as it is in Nari culture. Aya agreed. Though we express it through harmonic resonance rather than words, the closest translation would be our frequencies have become essential to each other's completion. That's beautiful, Jules said honestly. More poetic than I wonder if she'd marry me. Aya's garment rippled with amusement. Perhaps. But your expression had a charming directness that Nari phrasing often lacks. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Jules gathered his courage. So where does this leave us? Are we conducting research or exploring something else? The Nari see no contradiction between scientific discovery and personal connection. Aya said, often, the most significant discoveries occur when we allow ourselves to resonate fully with the subject of our study. That makes sense to me, Jules admitted. I've always understood machines better when I care about them. Maybe people work the same way. Perhaps tomorrow's research should focus on human bonding rituals, Aya suggested, her garment shimmering with anticipation. For comparative cultural analysis, of course. Jules couldn't help but laugh. Of course, strictly scientific. For the first time since they'd met. Jules didn't feel the need to filter his thoughts or measure his words. Whatever was developing between them, this strange, beautiful resonance, seemed to thrive on authenticity rather than careful calculation. And for someone who had spent his life calculating every social interaction, that felt like freedom. The days that followed brought a subtle but significant shift in Jules and Aya's relationship. Their formal research continued, daily sessions with the resonator spheres, detailed reports for the Elder Council, occasional demonstrations for Observer Hironi. But alongside these scientific pursuits grew something more personal. Jules began teaching Aya about human customs and expressions of affection. He showed her how humans shared food as a bonding ritual, preparing simple meals from the station's limited ingredients. He explained the concept of inside jokes, creating shared references that soon had them exchanging glances and stifling laughter during official meetings. Much to Commander Harrow's confusion. In return, Aya taught Jules about Nari culture, their harmonic architecture, their fluid approach to time, their reverence for what they called resonant authenticity. Using the smallest resonator sphere, she demonstrated how Nari children learn to project their emotions before they learn to speak, creating a foundation of empathic connection that preceded language. This is why your whispered thought was so significant, she explained one evening as they sat side by side on the couch, a hover-projected star map illuminating the room. It was pure resonant authenticity, unfiltered emotion projected without social calculation. Most humans would call it embarrassing, Jules pointed out. Speaking thoughts like that out loud is usually considered inappropriate. Yet it led to this. Aya gestured between them. Perhaps your social calculation would have prevented this connection. Jules couldn't argue with that. Had he relied on his usual careful social navigation, he would never have initiated any interaction with the intimidatingly beautiful alien diplomat. His accidental whisper, mortifying as it had been, had opened a door he wouldn't have had the courage to approach otherwise. During their third week of cohabitation, the Elder Council requested a progress report on their research. Jules and Aya presented their findings in the harmonic chamber, demonstrating the increasing stability of their resonance connection and the expanding range of emotional states they could successfully synchronize. Most significant, Aya reported to the council, is the development of resonance memory. Jules Rennes can now recall and reproduce specific harmonic states without the aid of resonator technology. To demonstrate, Aya deactivated all the resonator spheres, then asked Jules to project the teal resonance they had discovered during their first demonstration. Jules closed his eyes, focusing on the specific emotional quality of that moment, the blend of affection, trust, and discovery that had created the new harmonic. To his surprise, he felt the now familiar warmth spreading through his chest, radiating outward. When he opened his eyes, he saw Aya's garment flowing with the exact teal luminescence they had documented, responding to his projection without any technological assistance. "Remarkable," the lead elder commented, their own garment pulsing with what Jules had learned to recognize as scientific excitement. A human generating Nari-perceptible resonance without technological amplification. Even observer Hironi seemed impressed, his usually rigid posture softening slightly as he recorded the demonstration in his archives. After the council departed, Commander Harrow approached them with an uncharacteristic hesitation. "Engineer Rennes, Ambassador Aya," he began formally. "I've received a communique from Earth Alliance Diplomatic Corps. They've been briefed on your research collaboration and have expressed interest in exploring similar cultural exchange programs on other stations." Jules exchanged a glance with Aya. "That's good news, right?" "Potentially," Harrow agreed. "However, it raises questions about the future of this particular collaboration. The Nari delegation is scheduled to depart in 2 weeks, and standard protocol would have Ambassador Aya return with them." The realization hit Jules like a malfunctioning gravity generator. He had been so immersed in their daily routine, in the joy of their growing connection, that he had somehow forgotten the temporary nature of diplomatic missions. Of course, Aya would leave with her people. She was a herald, an ambassador, not a permanent resident of Station Aurea. "I see," he managed, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Well, we'll certainly have our research completed by then. The final reports should provide a solid foundation for future exchange programs." Aya's garment had darkened to a deep indigo, a color Jules had learned indicated deep thought or concern. "Commander Harrow, the Nari Collective values continuation of successful resonance pairings. There may be alternatives to consider." "Such as?" Harrow asked. "I shall consult with the Elder Council," Aya replied. "There are precedents for extended research missions when significant discoveries are at stake." After Harrow left, Jules and Aya walked in silence back to their shared quarters. The weight of their impending separation hung between them, creating the first dissonance in their harmonic connection since they had begun their cohabitation. Once inside, Jules finally spoke the fear that had seized his heart. "You're leaving in 2 weeks." Aya's stellar eyes met his. "That is the current schedule." "Yes. And then what happens? To this? To us?" Jules gestured between them. "Is this just a fascinating cross-cultural experiment that gets documented in some archive and then we both move on?" "Is that what you believe it to be?" Aya asked quietly. "No," Jules admitted. "It feels like a lot more than that, at least to me." Aya moved closer, her tall form casting a gentle shadow in the recalibrated lighting of their quarters. "To me as well, Jules Rennes. The resonance we have developed is rare. The Nari do not discard such connections lightly. But you have responsibilities, a position with your people. I can't ask you to give that up. And you have your life here," Aya acknowledged. "Your work, your purpose." They stood in silence for a moment, the reality of their situation settling around them like a heavy cloak. Finally, Aya spoke again. There is much we do not yet know. Let us not create dissonance with premature conclusions. The Elder Council may have wisdom to offer. Jules nodded, trying to take comfort in her words. But as they settled into their evening routine, Aya with her personal resonator, Jules with his technical manuals, he couldn't help but feel the countdown had begun on whatever this beautiful, unexpected connection between them had become. The following days took on a bittersweet quality. Jules found himself treasuring each moment with Aya more intensely, knowing their time together had a rapidly approaching endpoint. Their research continued, but with a new urgency, as though documenting every aspect of their resonance connection might somehow preserve it beyond physical proximity. One evening, as they sat together in one of the station's observation domes, watching the gas giant's swirling clouds through the reinforced glass, Aya shared more about her world. Niara orbits a binary star system, she explained, her slender blue finger tracing patterns on the glass. The twin suns create complex harmonic patterns in our atmosphere, layers of light and color that change with each rotation. Our cities are built to capture and amplify these harmonics. Jules tried to imagine it, cities designed around light and sound, buildings that sang with the movement of dual suns. It sounds beautiful. It is, Aya agreed, though perhaps not to human sensibilities. Many find it overwhelming at first. Too much input, too many frequencies at once. I'd like to see it someday, Jules said softly, even if it overwhelms me. Aya's garment shimmered with a warm copper glow. I would enjoy showing you my world. Jules Wren, your perspective would bring new resonance to familiar harmonies. The unspoken question hung between them. Would such a visit ever be possible? Would their paths cross again after the delegation's departure? Aya, Jules began hesitantly. What happens to Nari who form connections with beings from other worlds? Is there a protocol for that, like there is for research? There are precedents, she replied. Rare, but established. Cross-species bonds are recognized by the collective, though they often require adaptation from both parties. What kind of adaptation? Aya's stellar eyes seemed to study the distant stars beyond the gas giant. Career adjustments, relocation considerations, physiological accommodations. She paused, then added, the Nari value resonant connections above geographic convenience. Distance is seen as a surmountable obstacle when frequencies truly align. Hope flickered in Jules's chest. So there are options? Possibilities? Always, Aya assured him. Though they require courage and flexibility from both connected beings, as they continued to watch the swirling storms of the gas giant. Jules found himself imagining possibilities he had never considered before. Life beyond Station Aurea, beyond the familiar rhythms of his maintenance routines, beyond the comfortable isolation he had built around himself. For the first time, the unknown future seemed filled with potential rather than anxiety. 3 days before the Nari delegation's scheduled departure, Jules was summoned to Commander Harrow's office. He arrived to find Harrow looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable behind his desk. Engineer Wren, Harrow began formally. I've received communication from both the Nari Elder Council and Earth Alliance Command regarding your situation with Ambassador Aya. Jules swallowed hard. My situation, sir. Your research collaboration has apparently produced results significant enough to warrant continuation beyond the delegation's departure, Harrow explained, scrolling through a document on his datapad. The Elder Council has proposed several options for this continuation. Jules leaned forward slightly. What kind of options? Option 1. Ambassador Aya remains on Station Aurea as a permanent Nari liaison, continuing your research indefinitely. Harrow's expression suggested he found this option dubious at best. Option 2. You transfer to the Nari research vessel Harmonic Confluence as an Earth Alliance technical advisor, continuing your work there. Jules' heart raced at the possibilities. Those both sound workable, sir. Option 3, Harrow continued, ignoring Jules's comment, is that both you and Ambassador Aya transfer to the new Joint Resonance Research Facility being established on Niara, where your work would expand to include other human Nari research pairs. Jules could hardly believe what he was hearing. There are other human Nari pairs. Apparently, your case has inspired interest in similar collaborations, Harrow said dryly. The diplomatic corps sees potential benefits in deeper cultural understanding through these resonance partnerships. And what does Earth Alliance Command think of these options? Jules asked cautiously. Harrow set down his data pad with a sigh. Officially, they support whichever option best serves diplomatic relations and scientific advancement. Unofficially, they're intrigued by the possibilities but concerned about setting precedents for interspecies entanglements. It's research, sir, Jules said, though he knew that wasn't entirely true anymore. Harrow fixed him with a knowing look. Ren, I've been running space stations for 20 years. I know the difference between research collaboration and something more personal. Whatever is happening between you and Ambassador Aya goes beyond scientific curiosity. Jules didn't deny it. Does that create problems for the station or for Earth Alliance relations with the Nari? Surprisingly, no. Harrow admitted. The Nari seem to view your connection as a positive development, evidence of deeper compatibility between our species. And the diplomatic corps is pragmatic enough to leverage any advantage in strengthening our alliance. So what happens now? That, Harrow said, depends on what you want. Ren, you're a valuable member of this station's crew. Your work here has been exemplary, if occasionally unorthodox. I'd prefer not to lose you to a Nari research vessel or some joint facility on a distant world. Jules felt a surge of appreciation for the commander's honesty. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. But, Harrow continued, I also recognize that opportunities like this don't come along often. And personal connections. He paused, his normally stern expression softening slightly. Those are even rarer, especially out here. Jules nodded, understanding the unspoken meaning behind the commander's words. In the isolation of deep space, meaningful connections were precious commodities. You don't have to decide immediately. Harrow added, the delegation doesn't depart for 3 more days. Take that time to consider your options. Discuss them with Ambassador Aya. Make the choice that's right for both of you. I thank you, Commander, Jules said, rising from his seat. I appreciate your understanding. Just one thing, Ren, Harrow called as Jules reached the door. Whatever you decide, I expect a full technical report on that harmonic chamber setup before you go anywhere. That's some impressive engineering, even if I don't understand half of what it does. Jules smiled. Yes, sir. You'll have it on your desk tomorrow. When Jules returned to their shared quarters, he found Aya seated cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by hovering resonator spheres arranged in a complex pattern. Her eyes were closed, her garment flowing with gentle waves of blue and violet. She was performing what she had taught him was a decision meditation, a Nari practice for approaching important choices with clear resonance, not wanting to disturb her. Jules moved quietly to the small kitchen area and began preparing tea, a ritual they had developed together, blending Nari herbs with human brewing techniques. The familiar motions calmed his racing thoughts as he processed the options Harrow had presented. By the time Aya opened her eyes, Jules had 2 steaming cups ready. Her garment settled into a serene shade of blue as she accepted the offered cup. You've spoken with Commander Harrow, she observed, Not a question, but a statement. Yes, Jules confirmed, settling beside her on the floor. He presented the options from the Elder Council and Earth Alliance. And your thoughts? Aya asked, her stellar eyes studying him with gentle intensity. Jules took a sip of his tea, gathering his thoughts. I'm overwhelmed, honestly. A month ago, my biggest concern was optimizing the cooling systems in Section 4. Now I'm considering leaving the station, possibly even Earth space altogether. A change often comes when we least expect resonance shift. Aya noted, the question is not whether change is occurring, but how we choose to harmonize with it. What do you want, Aya? Jules asked directly. If all options were equally possible, which would you choose? Aya's garment rippled thoughtfully. I have completed my formal duties as Herald. The Elder Council has indicated that my next assignment would be at my discretion. She set down her teacup and met his gaze directly. I would choose the path that allows our resonance to continue developing. Location is secondary to that primary harmony. It's so you'd be willing to stay on Aurea? Or I could join the Nari vessel. Or we could both go to this joint research facility. Yes, she said simply. All paths have merit, so long as they converge rather than separate. Jules felt a weight lift from his chest. Whatever they decided, they would face it together. The how and where were just details. I've never been to Niara, he said, a smile tugging at his lips. I'd like to see those cities that sing with the light of binary stars. Aya's garment brightened with pleasure. And I would enjoy showing them to you. Though I must warn you, human neurological systems sometimes require adaptation periods to process Nari harmonic architecture. I'm willing to risk a headache for a good view, Jules assured her. Besides, I have a feeling I've been getting some practice with Nari harmonics lately. Indeed you have, Aya agreed, her garment rippling with that copper-gold hue of amusement. Your resonance sensitivity has increased 73% since our first encounter. Jules laughed. Is that an exact measurement? The Nari are very precise about resonance metrics, Aya said with mock seriousness, before her garment betrayed her with playful pulses of color. They spent the evening discussing the practical aspects of each option. The challenges of Aya adapting to long-term life on a human station. The adjustments Jules would need to make on a Nari vessel. The possibilities presented by the joint research facility. By the time they retired for the night, Aya to her meditative rest on the couch, Jules to his bed, they had not made a final decision, but the path forward felt clearer. The following day, they arranged a meeting with the Elder Council to discuss the details of each option. The lead elder, whom Jules now knew as Elder Resonant Thalai, received them in the Council's temporary chambers aboard the Nari vessel. Jules Wren, Elder Thalai greeted him with formal respect. Your resonance precedes you. Thank you, honored Elder, Jules replied with the Nari gesture of acknowledgement Aya had taught him. I appreciate the Council's consideration of our unique situation. Unique but not unprecedented, Elder Thalai corrected gently. The Nari have long valued cross-species resonance connections. They often lead to the most significant harmonious advancements. The Council spent the next hour explaining the details of each proposed option. The position on Niara would involve joining a newly formed research team studying cross-species communication through resonance technology. The role aboard the harmonic confluence would focus more on the technical aspects of integrating human and Nari systems. And remaining on Station Aurea would mean continuing their current research in a more controlled, isolated environment. Each path has merit, Elder Thalai concluded. The choice must align with your shared resonance. As Jules and Aya left the council chambers, they encountered Observer Hironi in the corridor. His normally rigid posture seemed slightly less severe, his garment showing subtle variations in its charcoal color. "Engineer Wren," he acknowledged with a formal nod. "The Council speaks highly of your resonance adaptability." "Thank you, Observer," Jules replied, surprised by the almost compliment. "I've had an excellent teacher." Hironi's stellar eyes shifted to Aya. Harold Aya has always demonstrated unconventional resonance exploration techniques. In this case, they appear to have yielded significant results. Coming from Hironi, this was practically effusive praise. Aya's garment pulsed once with acknowledgement. "The collective archives will benefit from detailed documentation of your continued research." Hironi added, "Whichever path you select." After he departed, Jules turned to Aya with raised eyebrows. Was that Hironi's way of giving us his blessing? As close as Observer Hironi comes to such expressions. Yes, Aya confirmed, her garment rippling with subtle amusement. He has revised his assessment of our resonance from potentially inappropriate to worthy of continued observation. High praise indeed, Jules laughed. They spent their final 2 days on Station Aurea saying goodbyes. Jules to his engineering team and the familiar systems he had maintained for years. Aya to the diplomatic contacts she had established during her stay. Mari organized an impromptu gathering in the station's recreation area, where Jules was alternately teased and congratulated by his colleagues. "So you're really doing this?" Mari asked him privately. As they stood watching Aya demonstrate a simple resonance technique to a fascinated group of engineers. "Leaving everything behind for a new life with your alien girlfriend?" "Not everything," Jules corrected. "I'm still an engineer, still working for Earth Alliance. Technically, just expanding my horizons a bit." Mari nudged his shoulder affectionately. "Look at you, getting all philosophical. A month ago, you could barely make eye contact during staff meetings, and now you're moving to an alien world to continue your resonance research." She made exaggerated quotation marks with her fingers. "It is actual research," Jules protested, though he couldn't help smiling. "With real scientific applications." "Oh, I'm sure." Mari agreed with a knowing smirk. "Very serious, important research that just happens to involve living with the most beautiful alien diplomat anyone on this station has ever seen." Jules felt his face warm. "It's more complicated than that." "I know," Mari said, her teasing tone softening into sincerity. "I've seen you two together, Jules. Whatever is happening between you and Aya, it's real, and it's changed you in good ways." She raised her glass in a small toast. "I'm happy for you, jealous, but happy." On their final night in Jules' quarters, they packed the few possessions they would take with them. Jules' technical manuals and plant collection, Aya's resonator spheres and personal items. They had decided to accept the position at the Joint Resonance Research Facility on Niara, agreeing that it offered the best balance of professional opportunity and personal growth for both of them. As Jules carefully wrapped his model spacecraft, he found himself filled with an unexpected calm. The anxiety that had been his constant companion throughout life had receded to a distant murmur, replaced by a steady certainty that he was moving in the right direction, even if that direction led into unknown territory. "You are at peace with our decision," Aya observed, her stellar eyes watching him from across the room. "I am," Jules confirmed, somewhat surprised by his own serenity. "A month ago, the thought of leaving my routine would have terrified me, but now," he shrugged, "it feels right." "Your resonance has stabilized," Aya noted with approval. "You project intention without fear now." Jules smiled at her observation. "I guess I'm finally learning to trust my own frequency, as you put it." They spent their last hours on Station Aurea in the observation dome, watching the swirling clouds of the gas giant below and the distant stars beyond. The same view Jules had watched alone for years, now transformed by shared perspective. "Will you miss this place?" Aya asked, her tall form silhouetted against the vast panorama of space. Jules considered the question. "Parts of it, the familiar systems, the people I've worked with. But I've realized something recently." He turned to face her. "Home isn't just a place or a routine. It's where you find the right resonance." Aya's garment flowed with warm colors at his words. "A very Nari perspective, Jules Wren." "I had a good teacher," he replied with a smile. As the station's night cycle deepened around them, Jules found himself thinking about that first day, standing in the observation alcove, watching Aya emerge from her vessel, whispering those impulsive, absurd words that had somehow set everything in motion. "Aya," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "That first day when I whispered about how beautiful you were and wondered if you'd marry me." "Yes?" she prompted when he paused. Jules looked up at her. This extraordinary being who had heard his most embarrassing thought and responded with curiosity rather than judgment, who had shown him how to trust his own resonance, who had opened up possibilities he had never imagined for himself. "I wonder if she'd marry me," he whispered, echoing his first words, but this time with deliberate intention rather than startled impulse. Aya's garment flowed with that luminescent teal, the color of their unique harmonic convergence. Her stellar eyes seemed to shine brighter as she leaned down to bring her face level with his. "I already have," she replied softly, "in every way that matters to the Nari." Jules felt the resonance between them, that mysterious, beautiful harmony they had discovered together, pulse with new depth and intensity. Whatever challenges awaited them on Niara or beyond, they would face them together, their frequencies aligned in a song that transcended species and distance. The next morning, as they boarded the Nari vessel that would take them to their new home, Jules Wren took one last look at Station Aurea, the place where he had lived in comfortable isolation until an accidental whisper had changed everything. He felt no regret, only gratitude for the strange, beautiful twist of fate that had allowed his most embarrassing moment to become the beginning of his most meaningful connection. As the vessel disengaged from the docking port with that characteristic Nari silence, Jules turned away from the view screen and toward Aya, toward their future together. The station receded behind them, growing smaller against the vastness of space, while ahead lay a world of harmonic cities, binary sunlight, and new resonances waiting to be discovered. "Ready?" Aya asked, her garment shimmering with anticipation. Jules took her hand, her slender blue fingers twining with his, and smiled. "Ready?" he confirmed, his whisper now a confident declaration. And this time, he meant for her to hear every word.